Your rising sign is not a star. It is a horizon, and it moves faster than anything else on your chart, which is why most people who look it up get an answer they have no way to check. Type your birth details into any free calculator, and a sign comes back in about a second. What does not come back is any sense of how much that answer can carry. Give it a time you half remember, and it returns the same confident sign it would return for a time known to the minute. It does not flinch, and it cannot. The calculator has no way of knowing which of those two you handed it, and it is not built to ask. So the answer on the screen is doing two jobs at once. It is reporting a calculation, and it is hiding how much the calculation depended on. So start somewhere else. Start with what the thing actually is. The Earth turns once a day, and it carries you with it. So from where you stand, the sky appears to swing the other way. There is a line drawn across that sky. Astronomers call it the ecliptic, the path the sun traces over a year. Every planet you have heard of sits close to it. At the moment you were born, one point on that line was climbing over the horizon in the east. That point is your ascendant. It is not a star, and it is not a planet. It is a place where two lines cross, which leaves one question worth asking. How long does any single point stay there? Here is why it moves so fast. The sun takes a year to travel the zodiac. The moon takes a month. Saturn takes nearly 30 years. The horizon does it in a day. A single turn of the Earth against the stars takes 23 hours and 56 minutes. 12 signs go past in that time. Divide it, and you get roughly 2 hours a sign. Nothing else on a chart moves at that speed. Everyone born that week carries your sun sign. Everyone born that day carries your moon sign. Nobody born 2 hours later carries your rising sign. Now push that rate one step further. A sign is 30 degrees wide. It crosses in about 2 hours. Divide it down, and the ascendant moves 1 degree every 4 minutes. 4 minutes. That figure is an average, and this comes back later. But it is the number to carry. 4 minutes of doubt in your birth time is a degree of doubt in your chart. 90 minutes of doubt can be a whole sign. Here is what that looks like on a real chart. Take the 15th of June, 1990. London. At 6 in the morning, the ascendant sits at 21 degrees of Cancer. Move the birth time to 8, and it reads 13 degrees of Leo. Move it to 10, and it reads 4 degrees of Virgo. Same day, same city, same hospital, the same parents, the same everything. 4 hours of clock, and the chart has a different first house 3 times over. And these are not edge cases picked to make a point. Those are ordinary hours to be born in. Any 4-hour window on any date does the same thing. That is not a rounding artifact. It is the rate doing exactly what it does. Nothing about the person changed, only the number written on the form. There is a complication, and it is why the 4-minute rule is an average. Signs do not rise at equal speed. At London, Aries clears the horizon in 52 minutes. Virgo takes 171. That is a spread of nearly 2 hours between the quickest sign and the slowest. The whole table is worth seeing because it is not random. The durations mirror. Aries and Pisces both take under an hour. Taurus and Aquarius both take about 70 minutes. Cancer and Sagittarius both take 2.5 hours. The signs pair off across the circle, and the pairs match to the minute. Half the zodiac rises quickly and half of it drags, and the tradition has names for both. Signs of short ascension. Signs of long ascension. move to the equator, and the spread collapses to about 19 minutes. It never reaches zero, because the tilt of the Earth on its own is enough to keep the signs uneven. The further you go from the equator, the more lopsided it gets. Now change the other input. Two people are born in the same minute. One in London, one in Sydney. They share a date. They share a clock reading. Every planet sits at the same degree for both of them, because planets do not care where you are standing. The horizon does. In London, the ascendant is 21 degrees of Cancer. In Sydney, at that same instant, it is 11 degrees of Sagittarius. 5 signs apart. That is not a small disagreement. Under whole sign houses, those two charts do not share a single house placement. It is worth being exact about what changed and what did not. The planets did not move. Their degrees are identical on both charts, down to the arc minute. What moved is the frame. London and Sydney face different parts of the sky at the same moment, so a different point of the ecliptic is rising at each. Everything a chart says about where a planet sits comes out of that frame. So the same planet, at the same degree, lands in a different house, depending on which city the form was filled in. Which is why the birthplace is not a formality on the form. It is half the calculation. The clock gives you one number, and the map gives you the other, and the ascendant needs both. Get the city wrong by a few hundred miles, and you have shifted the answer. Get the country wrong, and you may have shifted the sign. So the time has to be right, and the place has to be right. Which raises the obvious question: where does a right time actually come from? Start with the paperwork. A real time lives there, or it lives nowhere. Where you were born decides whether this is easy. American long-form certificates almost always carry the hour and minute. British ones do not carry it at all, unless you were a twin. Canada and Australia are mostly the same as Britain. After that, the hospital. Delivery records survive longer than people expect, and they are the closest thing to a primary source you will get. Then, last, memory. A parent remembering a birth is remembering an event, not a clock face. Ask by all means, but treat the answer as a starting point rather than a reading. Now the part that quietly ruins charts. A birth time is a clock reading, and clocks have been moved around a great deal. Daylight saving is the obvious one. The dates it starts and ends have changed repeatedly, and they have never been the same everywhere. Then there are the wartime regimes. Britain ran on double summer time in the summers of 1941 to 1945. The clock stood 2 hours ahead of Greenwich. It came back for a single year in 1947. A chart built from the clock, without checking what the clock was set to, can be a whole sign out. One more and it is subtler. A birth certificate in the United States records the time to the minute. The form allows that precision. Whether the moment got it is another matter. Rounding toward convenient numbers is a well-documented problem in medical record keeping, and there is little reason to think birth times escape it. So a time reading 6:30 may be exact. It may also be a best glance at a wall clock. And a chart set to noon, because nobody wrote anything down, has no ascendant. It has a placeholder, which brings us to what this one number actually decides. Here is what rests on it. The ascendant is the start of the first house. Every other house follows from it in order around the circle. Move the ascendant, and the whole frame turns with it. A planet that sat in the 10th is now in the 9th. Nothing about the planet changed. The floor under it did. That is why this single number carries so much weight. It is not one placement among 40. It is the origin the other placements are measured from. It also decides the sign the tradition treats as your first house. Under whole sign houses, that single step builds the entire structure. Your rising sign is your first house. The next sign is your second. The chart follows from one decision, and it inherits every error in it. Get it wrong, and you have not made one mistake. You have made every mistake at once. This is old, and it is worth saying how old. The Greeks had a word for the rising point, horoscopos, the hour marker. The tradition has treated it as the first house since the Hellenistic period. The method for calculating it traces back to Alexandria in the 2nd century before the Common Era. That is worth pausing on. The people who worked this out had no telescopes and no clocks worth the name. What they had was geometry and a horizon and centuries of patient record-keeping behind them. The arithmetic they used is the arithmetic in the calculator you typed your details into. What the tradition reads into the ascendant has shifted a great deal since. What has not shifted is the position it holds. Every system that came afterwards, whatever else it disagreed about, kept the rising point as the place a chart starts. That is a long time for one convention to survive. One last distinction, because these two get confused constantly. Your sun sign answers where the sun was. That takes a date and nothing else. It is the same for everyone born in the same week. It is also the only part of a chart to survive with no birth time at all. Your rising sign answers which way the Earth was facing. That takes a date, a time, and a place. Different question, different input. Different level of confidence in the answer. So, 3 things to take away. Find the time, the long certificate first, the hospital record second, memory last. Check the clock. Daylight saving and wartime rules have moved more birth times than bad memory ever did. And know the rate. 1 degree every 4 minutes, on average, which means a time rounded to the nearest hour carries a span of about 15 degrees. That is not a reason to distrust the answer. It is what lets you say how much of it you are standing on. Next time, what to do when nobody wrote the time down at all. It is less hopeless than it sounds. There are 3 things you lose, and rather a lot you keep.